Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have got another great guest this evening, Kevin Wright. I reached out to him, I would say maybe a month and a half ago or something like that, when I started seeing what he was doing with his Solve advocacy. He also advises the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU, as well. So I saw what he was doing. I thought it would be very interesting, and the timing kind of works for what's going on. They're still trying to squash the Schumer situation. I'm going to play a clip quickly on that in just a minute. So, anyway, it's Kevin Wright, and he will be on in just a minute as a guest. So, the blog this week is the titled NASA and the UFO Problem. Another great one by Charles Lear. It goes all the way back to 1973, talks about when Jimmy Carter was involved, and also talks about his sighting as well. And a very interesting blog by Charles Lear. Please check that out when you can on our website, podcastufo.com. It's over on the sidebar, but if you click in the live chat right now, you can sign up real quickly. It opens in a new window. You can sign up your email address and get weekly newsletters that basically tell you what our blogs are going to be, a link to them, and also our guests and information about our guests. And sometimes that's really good to have because I'll announce, for instance, tonight, as I know right now, Michael Schratt will be here next week, but sometimes that changes. So, it's really good to get the updated information. And I do not send out a lot of those. They just go out one time a week if you're worried about any of that. So getting a lot of feedback, some positive, some not so positive, from what I'm doing with the Crossfire. That's every Thursday night with three other gentlemen, and that's right here on YouTube live. And I've said in the beginning myself that I didn't want to get into any of the politics out there. I just wanted to talk about UAP. Sometimes they're intertwined, so I do understand that. But we got in a bit of a little heated discussion last week. Some people love it. I personally, I'm not interested, as I say, into talking about politics because I think it opens a lot of issues because of the divisiveness of this country. So I just don't want to get into that and cause all these discussions that lead away from the UAP subject. So just a little discussion. That's it. I just wanted to get that out there. So every Thursday we're going to be running this week. I'm not sure what the topic is yet. It might be about whistleblowers. So check us at 8 p.m. Thursday evenings right here on this YouTube channel and on KGRA Radio Live, which we are right now. And we may take calls later on during this show in itself. And I'm going to welcome our guest, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Martin. Like you said in
Yes.
your opening monologue, we've been discussing this for quite some time, and I'm thankful for you to have me on.
That's right. And you were behind me. We were standing in that line on July 26th in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, you should have been able to get into the room because I think I was number 12 and 13 in line with my producer. And you were just like 10 behind me, yet you didn't get in with all the people that kind of slid in front of us. I just barely got in, luckily. But it's unfortunate you went through all that trouble. And I really feel bad for the people that waited in line. Some people were waiting in line at 6:37 and didn't get in. That should have been able to get in, but like I said, it's kind of who you know, and people slid in front of other people. And some people were standing in line supposedly, as a substitute. I know my friend Chris Lito had a substitute, and they went to the wrong building, so it didn't work anyway.
Well, he did make it into the room, though.
He did. Yeah, he was the last person in the room. Chris was.
But, so yeah, that's an interesting story because I was actually there at about 6:30 as well. And so there were some placeholders there. They're paid to hold the place for other people. And so without naming the names of who those people were, there was a bunch of people that were able to sort of jump in line, and I missed by, a couple people. But that's okay. I was still there.
Yeah.
I was in the overflow room, and it was still a historic moment. And there were hundreds of people lined up in that hallway, and it was pretty awesome.
They said, I don't know if anyone confirmed it or not, but they thought there was over 1,000 people that showed up for that. And I don't know if there's any way they could have counted that, but I did talk to someone in the hallway there, and they said they have never seen anything like that. So that is the key topic. Why this? That is the key reason why this topic is such a hot topic, is because there are so many people interested. And speaking of that, I'm going to play this clip right here. This is Chuck Schumer yesterday, I believe it was, and we're going to talk a little bit about this subject. Here we go.
While it's not related to China, House Republicans are also attempting to kill another common-sense bipartisan measure passed by the Senate, which I was proud to co-sponsor with Senator Rounds as the lead sponsor, to increase transparency around what the government does and does not know about unidentified aerial phenomena. Unidentified aerial phenomena generate intense curiosity for many Americans, and the risk for confusion and misinformation is high if the government isn't willing to be transparent. The measure I championed with Senator Rounds would create a board, just like we did with the JFK assassination records, to work through the declassification of many government records on UAPs. This model's been a terrific success for decades. It should be used again with UAPs, but once again, House Republicans are ready to kill this bipartisan provision. Now we're going to get the NDAA done this year, just like we have for more than 6 decades.
So there it is. And, it's still hanging in the lurch at this point. Is that right? We don't really know what's going to happen with it.
Yes. I think we should all be proceeding as though this is still a fight that's to be had. The ink is not dry. The die has not been cast yet. We need to all be fighting in favor of passing the Schumer Rounds the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Act 2023, contained in the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, and keep working to make sure that's passed as it was written by Senator Schumer, Senator Rounds, and another bipartisan group of senators, another 3 or 4 on each side. So yeah, we need to keep fighting because this is not yet decided.
And, I usually ask people right off the bat, and I think we should back up just a little bit and get back into this, but basically this is the first time you've been on this show.
Sure.
We've talked on the phone a number of times, but let's find out who you are and what is the Solve Advocacy, what made you start that. And I understand you are involved in sort of, what would you call it, cutting edge or things that are, this was something that interested you to work in. And I know you do other things as well. So let's just, if you would, just fill in our audience with who you are, basically.
Sure. So I've been working in Washington, D.C. for about 25 years in various capacities, research, communications, public affairs, general political sort of matters, working on political campaigns ranging from things that are as small as county executive race to state and state senator, state representative, all the way up to presidential super PACs, public affairs campaigns, statewide ballot initiatives, nonprofits. So I've been in this game for a very long time, but I'd say in the last 4 or 5 years, I've become more and more disinterested from the regular sort of political arguments and fights and partisanship. And so it dovetails sort of with what's going on now. But to get to where we got to with the UFO issue is that, I started reading about consciousness studies and afterlife studies. And if you have read about it for long enough, you realize that there is some sort of component that seems to come together with this phenomena. And so, growing up in the 1980s and 1990s, you watch the X-Files and that sort of thing, and it's of interest. And I watched it. The first 6, 7 seasons were great, but I never really gave it that much thought. So when I started delving into these other sort of fringe, well, what would most people would call fringe subjects, I became aware that there was some sort of connection and correlation, what's going on with this phenomena with UAP UFOs, and it became sort of like an obsession that I needed to started getting involved. And it became clear, obviously, that the government is hiding significant data from the public and the scientific community and the academic community. So about a year ago, I decided that I was going to start working on sort of this advocacy issue, and I started reaching out to people and trying to figure out who would be receptive to, this sort of work. And what I found was that, there's a lot of people that are receptive to it, but they're not necessarily, willing to get their hands dirty and, get the elbow grease and, help make it work together. But that's coming together now in the last, several months here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you working, you actually got me connected with Danny. I had talked to Danny Sheehan, in line, and asked him if he'd be a guest or whatever. But he gave me one of his emails that he probably doesn't look at. You were kind enough to help me get him on the show last week, and
and we greatly appreciate it, because it was sort of like we need to start getting, Daniel Sheehan on some shows and talking about this and advocating, because we're at a situation right now. It's a critical juncture of making sure that this, UAPDA amendment to the NDA passes. So I was so, happy that you were receptive to that and helping us get him on, last Tuesday. Thank you.
Yeah. And it was really an interesting show, and lots of views on YouTube. There's a lot of people that have watched that, and a lot of downloads on audio as well. So it's good. And I'm hoping that a lot of people have, done some efforts and contacting, the representatives to, not have the Shermer Act go away. I was a little surprised at Burchett was trying to make his own type of act, kind of to maybe dovetail or to be something to be included in the National Defense Funding Act that they do every year. But when I had Stephen Bassett on our Crossfire show recently, last Thursday, he basically says, no, that's not what we want. That's not good enough. And so I wanted to get your opinion on that. I mean, I do appreciate Burchett's really good efforts trying to get transparency, but it doesn't go as deeply as Schumer's, right?
Well, yes. I mean, Burchett and others who have, advocated for this are, I think, well-intentioned and well-meaning, because they want more disclosure of what the government knows sooner than what the Schumer-Rounds UAPDA amendment would provide. But the problem with, the Burchett amendment is that, well, I mean, there's a number of it. I mean, it's 3 paragraphs long. Is directed only at the Department of Defense. It addresses unidentified aerial phenomena, which does not then include. I mean, so we have to consider the fact that in all of this stuff, we're talking about parlance and word games and word salad and things. So if we define something as narrow as unidentified aerial phenomena, we're not talking about the overall phenomena, which would also include like unidentified submerged objects, which is a very real issue too, which the Schumer amendment would address, because it addresses unidentified anomalous phenomena. So when you talk about only unidentified aerial phenomena, you're excluding a whole wide range of other issues that are engaged or that are involved in this issue. So, I mean, that's one significant flaw. The other flaw is that, it addresses only Department of Defense. It doesn't address the intelligence community. It doesn't address aerospace, defense contractors. It doesn't address a number of issues here. So there are all sorts of loopholes here. It looks like sort of like a piece of Swiss cheese that the gatekeepers are going to drive all the information through and forget about it, so.
Well, I guess I'll ask you this. Would it be better than nothing, or should we not even think about that type of that type of thought process?
Are we talking about Schumer or Burchett?
Oh yeah, Burchett. I mean, yeah.
Well,
should we
I
not?
think
Should we not even try to go in that direction at all? If that's what it's, if it's going to be a problem.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with passing the Burchett amendment to the Schumer amendment. It would be a tack on at the end of the Schumer amendment to the NDA. So
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with passing it. The problem is that you're not likely to get much from it. But we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to advocate here and get these amendments passed. And then no legislation is perfect. It doesn't matter if it's a Democratic piece of legislation or a Republican piece of legislation. We can always go back and revisit them. We can amend them. We can pass new legislation. But we can't say this isn't perfect. We can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We have to continue forward and continue pressing Congress, continue pressing the government, advocating for truth and transparency and open and honest government.
Right. It's a good question. I ask people if they'd put questions in caps. And how's the dog doing? That's someone coming
hopefully
to take
that will
care of
stop
them, right?
very soon.
Yeah.
I have somebody coming to help with kids, putting the kids to bed and stuff. So, but hopefully that'll be over very soon.
Okay, so I think it's a good question. We don't really know who would be on the board, or do we have any idea who would be on that board?
Well, I see the question here. So the Schumer board, it's not the Schumer board, with all due respect. It is the presidential board. So the president of the United States, in this case, Joe Biden, will nominate the 9 people that will sit on this board. And then the United States Senate will confirm them or not. So we have lots of people that are going to probably be, transmitting recommendations to the President of the United States in the White House. Daniel Sheehan and the New Paradigm Institute is one of those organizations that will be recommending people to the White House for people who should be sitting on this board, which will include a host of people of, a diverse sector of people that are all civilians that have various experience in, sociology and history and various things. So we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, first of all, we have to get this amendment passed. Once it's passed, then we'll advocate for the people who should be on the board. And then we will advocate, for or against whoever it is that the President of the United States nominates to it when it goes before the Senate for them to confirm.
So where does it, do we know when this is going to be voted on?
Well, we don't know exactly, but I think we should run under the assumption that probably by Monday, December 11th, the die will be cast, because the House is scheduled to leave on recess on Thursday, the 14th, I believe it is. So we still have a little bit of time to advocate and convince members of the Congress that they need to support the Schumer Rounds Amendment and do so as it was written by Schumer Rounds, Marco Rubio, Kristen Gillibrand, and others, and say that this is the legislation that we want. This is the one that we demand and needs to be included.
Yeah. So it's kind of like whatever someone can do to help out there. We had information in our last show on, Twitter handles, things like that. But I mean, phone calls, anything, any type of agitation, basically, that you can give your representative, your senator. You have to basically work in your district's type of situation, right? Anything can be found online, though, through searching wherever you live, right?
Right, but there's a lot of easy ways to do this. For example, Daniel Sheehan's New Paradigm Institute, there's a call to action on the homepage. You click that button, and all you have to do is put in your name and your address and your zip code, and it will organize for you who your representative is in your district and your 2 home state senators, and it will automatically send a pre-filled out letter that you can also amend and add your own personal flavor to it, but it'll send the email to each or to your representative in both of your states or your senators at Congress, and send them that letter. So that's what we're advocating for to do. But we could also have people, handwriting letters, because that also means a significant amount of time and investment and care and cause that the district offices will take into account that you have taken that time to do so. But also make phone calls, write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper in your district and advocate for transparency from the government and from your representative and your senators, that this is an issue that you care about, because it extends way beyond just UAP. This is something that affects all of us in a much deeper way in terms of government transparency and having an open and honest government that works for us rather than working against us in the sense that it's keeping secrets and it's hiding secrets to protect itself so that we don't know what it's doing. So we're not issue advocating, we're not doing things, we're not voting, we're just sort of like walking around and not being participants in our democracy.
And so do you you obviously watched the show last week, and do you agree with a lot of what what Danny said, as far as that there's money involved here, campaign funds, things like that? Do you think that they're actually also, do you believe that they're playing a part in what's going on here?
Well, I think in the term, with regards to Mike Turner in Ohio's 10th district, and Mike Rogers in Alabama's, I think, 2nd district, yeah, absolutely. You're talking about, I think Mike Rogers has taken something around $2.4 million from defense military industrial complex donors. That's a significant amount of money over the course of, his career in Congress. And I think Mike Turner is probably taking about something like 1.7 million, I believe it is. That's a significant amount of money. Money corrupts. But I have to tell you that I think it runs deeper than that, because, and this sort of gets back down to the more base level about government transparency and what it does, and working for you or working for itself, is that, some of these people are more Niccolo Machiavellian than they are Thomas Jefferson. They enjoy having that information to themselves, but they don't necessarily want you to have it. They think that they are in a position to determine what information that you should be allowed to have. And it's a source of power and persuasion and a way for them to maintain that power. But it's also a symptom of, a government that we have that is really has, this sort of unelected bureaucracy within it that churns and continues to perpetuate, this lie of, UFOs, which is something that they actually created themselves. They created this stigma to have people not believe that this is true, to make fun of each other, so they can't have a public discourse about it. And this gets back to them having this power because it's protecting itself. Because if people are talking about UFOs and something being out there and not being ridiculed about it, they can make an issue of it and an election issue of it. So what they want to do is make sure they tamp down on that and say, no, that's stupid, that's ridiculous. And, they've had Hollywood buy-in, they've had, all kinds of buy-in to help perpetuate that myth. But it's really what it is a disinformation campaign against the American public, which is illegal, but they continue to get away with it.
Right. For the person that's new to this subject, and there's a lot of people that are, I always have to keep that in mind. The Robertson panel was back in, I want to say, was it 53? I think it was 1953. And that panel was all about coming up with ways to get people to look away from this topic or be afraid to talk about it. basically. So that's where all the ridicule basically started in 1953. Robertson panel. You can look that up. Just Google that. But it's an interesting way that the government was trying to steer people away from, reporting and talking about it, and turning it to so they were would be embarrassed to talk about it. And that's why the stigma is still out there today. And the reason why was because 1952, there was so many UFO sightings. It was just incredible. It was a banner year, and they just didn't know what to do, which way to turn, and so that's what they came up with. And so you can basically say since 1952 that the topic has been pushed as something the tinfoil hats would be interested in and all that. But I don't know if you were looking at this topic at all, Kevin, prior to the New York Times article coming out in 2017. But before that, I would say there's less ridicule now. There's still some ridicule, but much less ever since that article came out in the Times, and people started looking at this, without thinking it was just a big joke.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think the veil of sort of that wall that was built up to ridicule people and, put them in the corner with the dunce hat on, the tinfoil hat, and say these people are crazy and stupid, and so you don't discuss it. That is certainly, that veil is sort of, lifting. But, it is still there because the vast majority of people, we're talking on this podcast and we engage on UFO Twitter and all these other social media, areas, but we're a small segment of society. Most people are
Yes.
not paying attention to this issue, but which gets back to
Yeah.
sort of more the disinformation campaign, which is, wrapped in the mainstream media and the legacy media, and convincing them that they cannot cover this issue. One, for fear of, damaging their prestige and talking about something as, ridiculous and silly as UFOs, but also that they're, afraid that, certain reporters and things are afraid that they're not going to get access to the information that they've been privy to from places like the Department of Defense or the intelligence communities or other defense contractors or other inside sources that are, tangentially involved here. That it's like Ross Coulthart talks about, the drip, where if you're not getting this information, you're kind of your writing career as a reporter is kind of finished. So you're going to keep wanting that drip. You're going to want to keep getting that information from that source. So you're not going to go against that source and report against something that goes against them, which would be the truth, which is that this is a reality, that this is happening, that this is here, and it's in our atmosphere, it's in our waters.
The part that you said about earlier, you were talking about, USOs. You just said waters right there, but also along those lines, isn't it supposed to be like they call it the all domain anomaly? So that would supposedly include USOs.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like one of those Pentagon sort of clever names that they come up with. I mean, they had the AMSWAG or they have all these clever names that they come up with to sort of continue to obfuscate and confuse people as to what's really going on. But the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was officially enacted as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, sort of like what we're trying to do this year, but it was last year. It was in December as well. And I think the President of the United States signed it, Joe Biden signed it on Christmas Eve, actually, December 24th. And in that piece of legislation, it established, formally the ARROW office, which would investigate, essentially disinformation campaigns going back to 1945, which would predate Roswell. It would investigate crash retrievals. It would investigate reverse engineering programs, a whole host of things. So what I would say is that ARROW, as it was written into law, has not fulfilled its legislative intent. It has filled its office with people who are in the intelligence community, like Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I was at an event a couple weeks ago where Dr. Kirkpatrick was, speaking with a sort of a Q&A thing back and forth with Washington Post reporter, and it was at George Mason University. And who was sitting front row? It was the public affairs person from the Department of Defense, which is Susan Goff.
Oh, Susan. Yep.
Right. Handler. She's sitting there taking notes. I mean, you can't make this up. It's a wordsmith salad thing that they do of all these different names, and they just play these games, and they just keep playing this game. So, I don't know.
One of the things I thought when I ran the Shermer clip, a few minutes ago, was he makes a very good point. If there's not transparency, there's going to be disinformation, and of course, there's going to be more conspiracies, probably worse conspiracies than the things that they really know. So it does seem like it would be in their interest not to have that headache of all the disinformation that could come about by not having this thing. However, I totally get, what Danny mentioned last week, where, they're in people's pockets. There's no way they're going to, and you made a really good point too about the information. They just may want to hang on to that, but also because it's like a power type of situation. But also, if they actually do have this incredible technology that they're working on, it would be like the last thing in the world, and they would fight in every which way. I believe, I'm just guessing here, theorizing, but I would say that they'd fight in every which way they could possibly fight to hang on to this otherworldly technology if it does exist. Your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, the military industrial complex is about weapons and weapons platforms, right? I mean, that's what they do. So if the allegations are true that we have recovered craft and we have ceded them to defense contractors, then obviously the ultimate goal is to build weapons and weapon platforms and first strike capabilities.
That's just awful if you really think about it. I mean, my producer and I talk about this all the time, that it's just all the different ways we try to figure out to kill each other. It's so brutal, and no wonder they don't want to ever show themselves to us, whoever they are,
Right.
just because of our tribal, our ways. But, money is the big controller here. Money and, whether it comes to natural resources or whatever, there's always a struggle. There's always, one way to conquer the other, that type of situation. So what are your thoughts? Do you think there really is this? I'm just asking for your opinion right now, your personal opinion. Would you think there's a pretty good bet that there are some of these craft out there, or are you just interested to find out?
Well, personally, I'm convinced that there are. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not advocating for the truth to find out that there's nothing there. I'm advocating for the truth because there is something there. Look, Senator Schumer, Senator Rounds, and other senators that participated in the drafting of this amendment, which is 64 pages long. Somebody writes an amendment like Tim Burchett, it's 3 paragraphs. An amendment isn't usually something that's so elaborate that encompasses 64 pages. It doesn't talk about non-human intelligence and all these various components of this amendment if they don't already know that this is true. I mean, anybody that tells you, I see it on Twitter and other things where some people make the argument that somehow Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and David Grush and these other people have somehow convinced really very sober, powerful people like Chuck Schumer that this is, a reality when it really isn't, is just on its face preposterous. It's so absurd to even make that example. This is a reality. Chuck Schumer, Marco Rubio, Kristen Gillibrand, Mike Rounds, these people would not put their names to a piece of legislation and advocate for it. Senator Schumer got on the floor a couple months ago talking about the amendment, and he listed about 4 things that was in the NDA and other pieces of legislation coming at the end of the year that were of vital, critical importance. This was one of them. He's not going to advocate this if it's not true. He knows he's a member of the Gang of Eight. They've had whistleblowers come forward. They've had any number of other people, come forward, and they've had investigations. They've been doing this for, 3 or 4 years now. This isn't a joke. This is real. This is what's going on. This is what they're pushing because they believe the American public need to know what the government actually knows about this issue.
Right. I'm trying to put in this amendment PDF, and I got to tell you that I had posted it last week, and I'm just putting it right now, and so people can see it at least on YouTube, and I'll put it in the show notes. But what happened was that 64-page PDF all of a sudden goes nowhere. So I don't know what happened to the link, but I found a new one, and I just posted that in the live. So yeah, check that out. That is so thorough. It gets at anything. I had this question. I think I asked Danny last week was, is there any way that they can, try to bury this stuff, try to hide it, try to disassociate themselves, maybe start a new corporation and kind of push it off onto them, that type of situation. He says, no, the Schumer's thing gets right in there to every which way. So there's nothing they can do to basically, if they have it, they got to come clean with it. And I think that would scare anyone, like you're talking about the military industrial complex, anyone that's vested in this thing. They're going to try to figure out different ways to stop this whole thing from happening. So,
yeah, I mean, the eminent domain issue is significant because there's an enormous amount at stake for, all the parties involved. We're talking about, if Lockheed Martin has, as has been alleged, a piece or intact piece of technology or whole technology, and it was seeded by the government, then you'd have all kinds of people very upset, like, say, the tech industry, saying you gave Lockheed Martin or Pacific Industry this technology and gave them unfair, advantage in the competition industry. You also have other issues involved here where if Lockheed Martin is filing SEC filings and saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we have, what we're working on. Obviously, they don't get into some of the black budget issues because it's national security and top secret. But there is probably a significant amount of potential danger there to these companies because they have shareholders. They don't want to open themselves up to shareholder lawsuits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this disclosure process isn't easy. It's not as simple as saying to the public, this is what we know, this is what we have, this is what we don't know, because it has widespread repercussions that even if we sit down and try to game plan all of those repercussions, we might not even think of all of them. Let's just say, for example, that people have had, actual physical contact with some of these UAP or pilots of UAP, let's just say, and they've had physiological or psychological impacts as a result. If we acknowledge that reality, what's that impact on the insurance industry? they're going to have to start covering, medical benefits and things that aren't even, written into all the underwriting and things, right? Also, life insurance policies. I mean, those are just a couple of examples here, but when we talk about the disclosure and just everybody should have all the information all at once or something like that, there are significant issues involved with, with that happening. So to get back to the Schumer amendment, it's what we would call a controlled disclosure over a period of time that allows for, us to sort of digest not just the reality of this information for the public, but also for industry and legislation and regulation and everything else to catch up. What not passing the Schumer amendment does is potentially open the doorway to catastrophic disclosure, which is a plethora of whistleblowers coming forward and, just putting all this on the table. And then we're all like, oh my God, right? And then the chips fall down on the table and you see where they land, and then we might be in trouble. So it would be in the best interest of Mike Rogers and Mike Turner and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and everybody else involved to pass this amendment and get this information out, but do so in a responsible way that doesn't wreak havoc.
Now, last Wednesday, someone sent me an email and said one of the mics changed his course and now is, agreeing that we should have this. Was that just like a rumor going around? Do you know anything about that?
So I think, well, I can't say for sure exactly what your listener or audience member was saying, but I'm going to presume that they were probably talking about the press conference last week with Tim Burchett and Representative Luna and Moskowitz and others, where I believe it was Representative Gates said that Representative Rogers from Alabama was on board with their amendment, which would be the Burchett
Oh, that's
amendment.
what it is.
So
okay,
that's a bit of a ruse, though, right?
Yeah.
If you could say, Mike Rogers, Representative Mike Rogers from Alabama District 2, is is in favor of disclosure because he supports our amendment. That's BS, right? Because we already know that the Burchett Amendment has many, many deficiencies that allows the gatekeepers to travel through these Swiss cheese holes and not provide any meaningful, substantive information to the public. So saying that somebody switched their position, that's sort of, what these chameleons do in Congress is they make themselves look like they're doing something. It's three-card Monty is what it is.
Yeah. I do believe that those people you mentioned, Luna, Burchett, and Gates, they all seem very interested in this happening. They all they're really pushing for transparency. So, I'm so glad that this is a bipartisan situation, where you can't really point the finger. Hey, it's just like I mentioned in the monologue when I started, how divisive our country is. So it's like, it's not, Republicans against Democrats. It's like everybody's on board with this happening. And just like, Schumer said in the beginning, that there's great public interest in knowing what these things are. And, but the unfortunate thing is,
if I may just say real quickly here,
go ahead.
When I speak about the Burchett Amendment or that press conference from last week, it's not meant to disparage Burchett or Luna or Moskowitz or Gates or anybody else. It's just, I think that their amendment is may be well-intentioned, but it is not, it's not hitting the target, and it's not going to result in what they hope or intend that it will. So, but I'll let you finish. But I would love to talk about the bipartisanship about this, because although Senator Schumer was talking yesterday on the Senate floor about House Republicans, it's really about a handful of House Republicans But this really is a very bipartisan issue. But please go ahead.
No, I think I was kind of wrapping up right there. I'm just happy that it's not. I just think that there is great public interest in this. But then again, you were speaking. You're right. Us on there that tweet out or X out, whatever you want to call it today, on Twitter or X, whatever it is. We are a very small percentage.
Yeah.
It's just, and so with that in mind, do you see this type of situation in other avenues of what you look into, whoever you advocate for? Are there other similar things, or is this kind of like a thing on its own because of the implications of it?
Well, this is very unique. But I think there are avenues to reach way beyond sort of this niche community within like the social media, whether it's Reddit. Reddit actually has if it's like r/UFO, a gigantic following. But you have UFO Twitter, you have Instagram and Facebook, and there is a community, but it is relatively small in comparison to the rest of our country. So what we have to do is find a way to reach beyond, this sort of echo chamber where we're all sort of talking about the same thing, whether I'm on your podcast or it's Danny Sheehan or, Ross Coulthard or Louis Elizondo or Chris Mellon or anybody else, the Richard Dolans and all these people going on shows and, talking about these things. And you have really the same audience over and over and over again. We have to reach way beyond that. And so it's my opinion that we have to go to the American public and talk to them about this issue, but we can't just jump out there and scream aliens. We have to talk, we have to sort of bring them along with us because we're already, above like their sort of like knowledge base. So we have to inform them and then bring them along and then mobilize them. And, one of the ideas that I have, and I hope that we're going to have an op-ed coming up in the Roswell Daily Record soon, talking about this, which is that, people value an open and honest and transparent government. Polls show that people have lost their faith in government institutions. We're at near or historic lows in faith in Congress, in faith in the presidency, in faith in the Supreme Court, the judiciary. And they've also lost faith in faith and trust in the media. So what we have to do is go to the public or personally and make an appeal to them, which they already know, which is that the government is no longer working for them. We need to bring them along to like lift back up that torch of liberty and say, we are going to fight for this because you're going to start working for us. Because what right now the government hides behind sources and methods and national security. It is a impregnable legal shield that they use. The courts will defer to it all the way up to the Supreme Court and say if the government comes and says it's a matter of national security, we are going to side with the government. That's no longer the case. We're going to fight against that and say we're going to take this back from unelected officials and bureaucrats and say that just because we allowed somebody to pass a law that becomes, gives authority to somebody, we're not going to let them hide the secrets anymore. And we're going to take this into districts and states and advocate for it and make sure that people understand that we're going to fight for it.
Right. We have a caller on line one, and let's see, Ken from New York. We only have a couple minutes. Ken, welcome to the show. You have a question for our guest?
Thank you, Martin. Yes, I was curious with the situation with David Fravor chasing the Tic Tac and what appeared to be a launch platform from a submarine. Do you think that this technology could be our technology and they were testing the Air Force against the Navy?
In my opinion, no. they have like, blue on blue and whatnot. And it would be dangerous to test such technologies against ourselves with unwitting, friendly fire. So most people, I think, would say the answer to that is no. And, this isn't exactly new. People have seen Tic Tacs, or what we're calling a Tic Tacs, which is also looks like a propane tank or something like that. And you have reports of this going back to like the 1960s and 70s. We certainly didn't have that technology then. So what David Fravor and Commander Dietrich and others saw, in my mind, is not our technology. It is not Russian. It is not Chinese. It is something else. And, we have evidence of other things being inside the waters of our oceans and possibly lakes. When I was at the Seoul Foundation Symposium a few weeks ago, Dr. Kevin Knuth, who is a member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies and is involved in lots of other things, gave a presentation about, sonar readings on an underwater submerged object that was about 30% larger than any attack nuclear submarine that is in U.S. possession, and did not have a water signature that would indicate something actually moving through water, but they did have a radar ping on it, and it was traveling at 3,000 miles an hour.
3,000?
Well, 2,900 and something. But yeah, you get to the point. I mean,
amazing.
Something traveling through water without displacing water, but was able to pick up a radar signature on it and was traveling, faster than most planes can travel in the atmosphere, but in the water. So,
that's crazy.
I think that people that assert that it was just, an American submarine, it was some launch platform, and it was some American device of some sort, a drone or something, isn't paying attention, hasn't read the literature, and isn't doing anything about informing themselves about the historical nature about this phenomena existing for decades, if not hundreds or thousands of years.
Right. So right now we're just going to say goodbye. If you don't mind continuing on a little bit here, we're going to say goodbye to everyone over at KGRA Radio. We'll be back next week with Michael Schratt. And thank you all for listening, everyone over there at KGRA. So, yes, you mentioned that, and I have a friend of this show too. He's been on many times, and Mark D'Antonio. He's an astronomer. He was on a Navy submarine. You know who Mark is? Yeah. He was, and he saw. They had a fast walk or a fast mover or whatever it was, and that was 200 knots. That was, back many years ago. I just have to say thank you to KGRA over there. And so, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. And when I had Scott Cassell, who was had an encounter, a USO encounter, a very, very interesting encounter with a cubed object. One of the things he said was that, when this thing moved, it should have displaced water. It moved away from him. He said he's been near whales when they do that, and it kind of swirls you around, and this thing did nothing at all, which I think is fascinating, which doesn't make any sense that we know. Of course, like someone said on one of my shows, there's no such thing. I think it was last week. A astrophysicist was on my show, and he said, there's no magic. Aliens can't have magic, so it's something that whatever the technology is and the intelligence is, that they know how to do that we can't understand it yet, but there is a way to do it somehow, not displace water and to go through at any speed you want. And that's always been a fascination with me when I think about if, say, a UFO travels, 41, 4 light years, let's just say from the nearest stars, 4 light years away, and they travel here. Well, there's an awful lot of debris between, even though space is mostly empty, there's still debris out there that they could run into whatever speed they're going at. It seems like it would destroy anything, but it's probably the same type of situation that they can go through the media, no matter what it is, whether it's space or anything, and not have any type of collision or friction or any type of situation, which is really fascinating to really think about. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I
it's
mean,
just
I'm not a nuts and bolts guy. I work with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, and we have a great group of scientists and engineers and academics and things, and they're the ones that sort of study that, and they're like really super interested in all those nuts and bolts and how would this work? How does this, how did this do this or that? So I can't hypothesize about any of those things except, we talk about anti-gravity and various things, and we go back to like the 1950s, and there was a lot of literature about this sort of thing, and all of a sudden it stopped. And the question always becomes, why did it stop? Because there's probably something to it, and there's, I don't want to hypothesize again, but there's probably something about, this technology that puts it in some sort of, bubble that allows it to do what it does, that defies gravity, that defies physics as we understand it. Probably doesn't defy physics entirely, but just as we understand it in terms of our engineering and mathematics and things like that. But clearly something's going on where it's able to do various things like travel through the water without the water displacement, do 90-degree turns, going, Mach 5, traveling from 80,000 feet down to sea level in a matter of, a second, and traveling at thousands of miles per hour, and doing all the things it does that would transform a human. If it was inside of this thing without some sort of protective bubble of some sort, it would turn it into soup. So there's clearly something going on there that, who was it that wrote the book Managing Magic? I think it was Nicholas Redfern. Talks about this, and obviously Dr. Jacques Vallée talks about this. Numerous times in his books about what we see as this technology. We often think of it as magic, or in medieval times we might have thought about it as like fairies or some other thing, because it is so inexplicable. And we can't wrap our minds around how these things can do these things, given the knowledge that we have.
Right. Yes. Now, this is going back to this whole situation about the Schumer Act and all that. And this question is on. I like his icon image too. I love it. Why the lack of mainstream media coverage on this? And that's what I've been really puzzled by. When we were at that hearing, it seemed like there was very, very little coverage. It was such a major thing to have a hearing on, and yet there was so little mainstream media covering it. Very little. There's News Nation. There's a couple of other ones. I can't remember, The Hill maybe, or some other channels that were covering this pretty well. But what the heck? What's happening with that?
So News Nation has done, in terms of sort of broadcast internet news coverage, I would say that News Nation has been leading the way. I mean, they were the ones that had the first interview. It wasn't live, but it was recorded, but online for people to interact with David Grush, with Ross Coulthart. The original story was published in the Debrief, which is another great publication or outlet, who's leading the way on UAP and science and technology. And they led with the story. I think it was in like June 5th or something. And it was written by Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal. Ralph Blumenthal. And excellent article. And then they did some coordination with Ross, because they were all sort of working the same story. So Ross followed it up the following week with News Nation. But as to why, The Hill has also done a great job with Joe Khalil and Merrick. I'm gonna butcher the name, Merrick von Ramenkampf. On The Hill. Sorry. But
Yeah.
so those 3 or 4 outlets have done, a remarkable job. The Politico has done a good job too, because they've had some guest opinion op-eds by Christopher Mellon and a few others. But so as far as why the mainstream media isn't covering it, we sort of touched on this earlier, which is that it's been made to be such an issue of ridicule that they're afraid to cover it for fear that their readers are going to, say that they're crazy and whatnot. But I think even more importantly, that they're afraid of the government no longer providing their inside sources to their reporters and giving them their insider information and their anonymous source articles. And, according to anonymous sources, so and so said this about what the government's doing. And if they report on this, they're afraid that that source is going to dry up and they don't get that drip, like Ross Coulthart referred to on Need to Know, which is also another great platform of great insight
Yes.
as to what's going on.
Yeah.
I hope that answers
both,
the question for whoever asked it. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Bryce and Ross have both been on the show, but Bryce and I go way back, and I'm really glad he hooked up with Ross. It's a
yeah, it's
really
a great
good
show.
team. They do a
It's a great show.
really nice job. Yes. Always look forward
Maybe
to every
someday
one of
they'll
those.
have me on.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, I've been after Ross since let's see, June, and been trying to get him back on the show, and he's just so busy. And he was going to try to be on next week, but it can't happen. So I'll say, I really would really respect the work he's doing, and hope to get him back. Within the next couple of months, he should be on. I imagine on this, but he's always
Yeah,
such
so
a great.
I've communicated with
great
him
guest.
a couple times over the last year. He probably doesn't even realize it. He gets thousands of emails. But I met him at
Yes.
the Soul Symposium a few weeks ago, and I wanted to ask him, but didn't have the opportunity. I wanted to say, you travel back and forth between Australia and the United States so many times. Like, how do you manage all that jet lag? Like,
Yes.
the man is like a
Oh my God,
machine.
because it's so
It's like,
the traveling to Australia takes,
oh, it's a
you gotta
yeah.
you gotta have at least a couple of days to try to get back to normal. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
so someone just I'm not sure, I don't know this for sure, but this person is stating that the Grush will have a new News Nation interview on December 11th. We'll be looking
I've seen
forward to
that
that.
too. Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
that
Oh, you have.
reported.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So yeah, I was a little bit worried about David Grush being on, several shows, because I just was really hoping that, it would kind of just see where his thing went first before he started talking on people's shows. But so far that I've seen now, a lot of people sent me, clips and things from Joe Rogan. I did not watch that. I don't know if you watched it, but I did not watch that yet. But so far, I think he's been really holding his own. I haven't seen anything out there that makes me think any less of him in any type of way or whatever. He has a solid invitation to this show that I've sent through people that know him, and so he's aware of this show.
Yeah.
He did watch one of my shows and talked about it with this person. But yeah, I hope to get him on at some point. I think.
Well, I have to be honest, I don't have an inside track on that, so I
Yeah.
can't help you.
Yeah.
But good luck
Yeah,
with that.
but
Good luck with that.
yeah, yeah. But so let's just say that this amendment passes or whatever. What's some other things that you would do while working for transparency through your foundation on this?
Well, so the Schumer rounds UAPDA is not perfect. It does have carve outs and caveats and ways to continue the cover up and not divulge information to the public, which is, that the president of the United States will have ultimately authority to say no. just like the JFK Presidential Review Records Board. And, President Trump in 2017 and President Biden in 2019 both decided against releasing certain records, even though in 2017 that was the time frame that was up for all the records to be released. So there is potential.
You talking about JFK records?
Yes. So
Mhm.
the UAPDA and the Presidential Review Board will be modeled after that. So there are
Yes.
problems with it in that we still don't have documents today that relate to the JFK assassination,
Right.
because the President of the United States has the ability to say, we're going to continue to withhold that. So that would exist within, the Schumer-Rounds amendment, which is, of course, a problem. There are also other problems too, but like I said, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not going to, say this is imperfect legislation, so we're not going to continue to advocate for it, because we need to, and we can improve upon it, as we move forward. And one of the things we can do is continue to advocate for Congress to set up a select committee, or, short of that, we need to have the oversight committee and the intelligence community, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the Senate Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, these committees to have hearings to get this information out to the public, because it's vitally important that people know exactly what the government knows. But even more importantly is, they say that the cover-up is more is more important than the crime itself. And I think that's one of the reasons why this secret has been kept for so long, is that the government doesn't want people to know what it has done in furtherance of this cover-up. And the only way we're ever actually going to get to know that is if we have real investigative committees doing hearings in front of the public and letting them know, and putting people under oath and having subpoena power to let them know what it is that the government's done to the American people, and particularly, certain individuals in the community over the decades of what has transpired in furtherance of this cover-up.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've always thought that would be, the tough situation, like for them to, excuse me, once it was found out that there was things that were hidden and covered up, then they would just have so much explaining to do, and people would start thinking, well, what about this and what about that, and this happened then, or that person was banished for this reason, for that, or I mean, there's so many situations
People
over the years.
somehow committed suicide. It happened.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's happened. Yeah. So solve advocacy. Can someone reach out to you for just advice on how to help, I mean, with this type of situation? Are you, what I'm trying to say, you've gotten your documents to me, but is there a reason people can contact you? Would there be something they could help you with, or anything like that on your website?
Sure. So, I'm working with a lot of different people in this space, but, my intention is to do more than just UAP advocacy. It's to talk about a whole host of issues and help people, in what we call edge sciences, which would
Yes.
include consciousness studies and other issues. But, so I've also been working with Randall Nickerson, who is the director and self-financier mostly of Aerial Phenomena, which is a wonderful documentary, one of probably the best UFO documentaries that's ever been made, which was about the Aerial School sighting in 1994 in Zimbabwe. It's a historic case because it's one of the most well documented. It's John Mack, Dr. John Mack from Harvard University went there.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful film. So I work with him, to help sort of promote his film, because he didn't get the proper distribution or release that he should have gotten. Part of that had to do with the pandemic, and there are other legal issues that are involved with that. But so he does screenings around the country, one night exclusives, where he shows up personally discusses the film and does a Q&A afterwards. And he's got one coming up in Oxford, Mississippi on the 7th, I think. So I'm giving a little plug. But, it's a great film, and I like working with people that are authentic and doing something that's good. And I'm happy to work with anybody else that wants to work in this field, and help them further the cause.
Thank you. It's been really great having you on tonight. And I'm really glad that you sent the first email to me and we've gotten to know each other. It's been a
Same-
really, yeah. Really
Same
like
here.
what
I
you're
mean,
doing.
we've had,
Yeah.
numerous phone conversations over the last several weeks, like you opened up with. So I really appreciate you having me on. This isn't my normal sort of thing, but I'm happy to be on here because this issue is really important. And I think the more people that are, intricately involved in this and can help facilitate, this sort of process, the more people that need to get involved. So I'm happy to do it.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks so much. And I'll put your information down in the show notes and the text below on these various platforms. Thank you very much, Kevin. You take care.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure thing. All right, everyone. So we'll be back next week with Michael Schratt. And remember, if you want to check out UAP Crossfire Thursday night on this YouTube channel and at KGRA Radio, and that's at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.